Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're zooming in on Kuala Lumpur over in Southeast Asia. We're looking at it as a potential spot for, digital nomads.
Exactly. We've got this guide aimed right at remote workers thinking about KL.
And it draws on some serious experience, right?
Yeah.
From moveandstay.com. They've been helping folks find spots in Asia for ages.
That's right. Over 25 years, helping expats and travelers find places to live, work, rent short or long term. So yeah, this guide has a practical angle.
So think of this as like the quick briefing. Could KL work for you if you're working remotely? That's the mission.
Yep. Cut through the noise, get the essentials. Is KL a potential fit? Let's find out.
Okay, first impressions then. Kuala Lumpur.
Yeah.
What's the general vibe for someone landing there to work?
Well, the guide paints it as this really dynamic capital city. It's definitely becoming more popular for digital nomads in Southeast Asia.
Why is that, mainly?
It seems to be this blend. You get the modern stuff, good infrastructure, decent internet, all that. But it's woven together with like a really rich and accessible culture. So it's not just about being productive, it's about actually living somewhere interesting.
Right, the guide called it a melting pot. What does that actually feel like day to day?
It means you get this real mix of Asian influences. The guide mentions you can find everything from, say, the backpacker buzz in Chinatown to the really sleek upscale areas like KLCC, with the Petronas Towers.
Gotcha.
Plus, it points out the locals are generally friendly and the city has energy, but maybe not as overwhelming as some other big Asian cities.
Manageable buzz. I like the sound of that.
Yeah, sort of energetic, but you can still breathe.
Okay, let's get down to brass tacks, though. Money. Cost of living. What's the lowdown?
Right. Affordability is definitely a big plus point, especially, compared to Western cities.
But there's a catch.
Well, not really a catch, but the guide, and this probably comes from Movie and Stay's experience, tracking costs stresses that it really hinges on your lifestyle.
How so?
If you eat local, use public transport, you can live pretty cheaply. But if you want Western comforts, fancy condos, imported groceries, then yeah, the costs go up naturally.
Makes sense. Does the guide give any, ballpark figures, say, for rent or food?
It does, yeah. In Malaysian ringgit, MYR accommodation, they estimate maybe 1,500 to 4,000 MYR a month. Big range, depends heavily on location and the type of place.
Okay. And food?
Food, maybe 800 to 1,500 MYR. Again, depends if you're hitting the hawker stalls or looking for avocado toast every day.
Oh, okay.
Transport, pretty reasonable, maybe 200 to 500 MYR using public transport and ride hailing. Entertainment, 300 to 800 MYR, depending how social you are.
And the crucial one, internet.
Yeah, internet and mobile plans are good value, around 100 to 200 MYR a month, and the coverage is generally solid.
So potentially very budget-friendly, but you got to choose where your money goes.
Exactly. The guide basically says do your homework based on your priorities. A comfortable life is definitely doable without spending a fortune, though.
Good to know. Okay, moving on from money. Cultural stuff. Adapting. What tips does the guide offer?
This is important because KL is so multicultural. Respecting local customs is key, and Movency's background probably informs this advice, too.
Like what specifically?
Things like dressing modestly, especially if you visit mosques or temples, cover shoulders and knees. Pretty standard stuff in the region, really.
Right.
Also, taking your shoes off before going into someone's house, that's a big one. And using your right hand to give or receive things. The left hand is seen as less clean traditionally.
Oh, interesting detail. Good to remember.
Yeah, small things, but they show respect. Also, being mindful of noise, particularly in residential areas at night.
Makes sense.
And maybe learning a couple of basic Malay phrases. Even just terima kasih, thank you, goes a long way.
A little effort always helps.
Definitely. And just, patience and a smile can smooth over any little cultural bumps. Oh, and it briefly mentions digital nomad visas for longer stays. We can circle back to that.
Okay, yeah, we'll definitely need to cover visas. But first, actually getting around the city. How's the transport?
The guide says it might look a bit confusing at first, but it's actually pretty decent once you figure it out.
Huh?
You've got the LRT, light rail transit, and the MRT, mass rapid transit. Those are your main workhorses for getting around efficiently. Modern, air-conditioned, cover a lot of ground.
So trains are the way to go.
They're often the best bet, yeah. There's also the monorail. It's elevated, gives you some views, but it can get really packed. Buses are cheap, but, traffic in KL can be pretty bad, so they can be slow.
Right.
For longer stays, the guide suggests getting one of those rechargeable travel cards. Makes hopping on and off easier and cheaper. Again, practical advice likely from helping long-term residents.
Sensible. What about grabbing a taxi or using ride-sharing?
Oh yeah, ride-hailing is huge. Grab is the main one, super popular, convenient, relatively cheap. You avoid the haggling you might get with regular taxis.
Is it safe?
Generally, yes. The guide says it's reliable, but standard advice applies. Double-check the driver and car details match the app. It also mentions another app, InDrive, might be worth looking at too.
And you need local SIM for that, presumably.
Strongly recommended, yeah. For booking, contacting the driver, all that. Makes life much easier.
Okay. What about just walking or cycling? Is KL that kind of city?
Not really known for being super bike-friendly overall, mainly because of the traffic, but there are places.
Like parks?
Exactly. Pradana Botanical Garden gets a mention for walks. And some areas do have bike lanes. But the guide cautions about traffic and also the heat and humidity. It's tropical, remember?
Yeah, cycling in that heat.
Yeah.
Maybe not ideal.
Probably not for your daily commute unless you're really keen. And again, the guide links this back to the DE Rantown Nomad Pass for longer stays, hinting it might offer some benefits, though it doesn't specify transport ones here.
Okay, so public transport and Grab seem like the daily drivers. Now, where do digital nomads actually, live? What kind of accommodation is there?
Lots of variety, which is good. The guide, drawing on Move-In Stay's listings knowledge, points to a few popular neighborhoods.
Such as?
Phuket Bintang, if you want to be right in the middle of everything. Food, bars, shopping. But it's pricier.
Right.
Mont Kiara is more upscale, popular with expats, families. Quieter, lots of amenities. Bangzar is trendy cafes, restaurants, kind of a relaxed vibe, well-connected.
And near the towers?
KLCC, yeah. That's prime location, near attractions, business district, mostly modern, often luxury places there.
So different areas for different tastes and budgets. What about the actual types of places? Apartments? Hotels?
All of the above. Apartments are big. You find serviced ones or listings on Airbnb or Booking.com. Hotels, obviously, from budget to luxury, good for short stays or if you want the services. Then you have guest houses, hostels, more budget-friendly, good for meeting people. And co-living spaces are popping up more, too.
Co-living. That sounds interesting for nomads.
Yeah, you get your private room, but shared workspaces and that built-in community feel. Definitely appealing for remote workers.
What's the deal with short-term versus long-term renting?
Well, short-term, like Airbnb, gives you flexibility, lots of choice, but can cost more per night.
Right.
For longer stays, months or more, renting directly from a landlord is usually more cost-effective. But then you've got leases, deposits, that kind of thing.
And how does KL compare cost-wise for long-term rentals?
Interesting point the guide makes, again, likely based on Move-In Stay's regional data. While KL rentals can be reasonable, they might still be a bit pricier than, say, Chiang Mai or Da Nang in Vietnam.
Okay, good comparison point.
Yeah, so you need to weigh it up. Consider your budget, lifestyle, how long you're staying, what amenities you need, especially a quiet place to actually work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, the absolute essential for remote work, internet. How's the connectivity in KL?
Generally pretty good. Staying connected isn't usually a hassle. Cafes, restaurants, hotels, most have Wi-Fi.
The quality varies.
It can, yeah, as you'd expect anywhere. So mobile data is a really good backup. It's affordable, easy to get a local SIM card. Just make sure your phone's unlocked first.
Good tip.
And if you need rock-solid internet all the time, the guide suggests maybe getting a portable Wi-Fi device. Might be worth the investment for some people.
Okay. And when you want to work outside your apartment, where do people go?
Cafes?
Cafes are super popular, yeah. The guide suggests looking for the obvious things. Reliable Wi-Fi, power outlets near tables, comfy seats, and an atmosphere you can actually focus in.
Any specific recommendations?
It names a few well-known spots like VCR Cafe, Merchant's Lane, Fika Coffee Roasters, places known to be decent for working. But the advice is basically explore, try a few, maybe ask about the Wi-Fi speed.
Makes sense. Find your own spot. What about more dedicated workspaces? Co-working?
Yep. KL has a growing co-working scene. These places offer, faster, more reliable internet, meeting rooms if you need them, printers, scanners.
Networking.
Exactly. Big plus. Networking opportunities. The guide lists some popular ones. Common Ground WRQ Colony gives rough monthly prices starting around $450 MYR and up.
What makes them different? Some have multiple locations, different membership levels. Some focus on, stylish design. Worth checking out a few if you plan to use them often. And again, for long-term use, the guide mentions thinking about that digital nomad visa.
Okay, perfect segue. Let's talk visas. This is crucial. What are the options for digital nomads in KL?
Right. The good news first. Lots of nationalities can enter Malaysia visa-free for tourism, often for up to 90
But
days.
that's just tourism.
Technically, yes. And the absolute must-do is check the official Malaysian Immigration Department website for your specific country's rules. And check your passport validity needs at least 6 months left.
Okay, standard procedure. What about longer stays for working remotely?
That's where it gets more specific. The main thing right now is the DE Rantau program. It's basically Malaysia's version of a digital nomad visa.
Who's it for?
It targets digital professionals, freelancers in specific fields, allows them to stay and work longer, but there are requirements. Proof of income, you need to meet a certain threshold. Health insurance is mandatory. And other criteria set by MDEC, the Malaysia Digital Economy Corporation.
So DE Rantau is the main path for long-term digital nomads.
Currently, yes, the most direct one. The guide mentions other things briefly, like tourist visa extensions, but stresses they aren't really meant for working.
Right.
Or getting a proper work permit if you actually get a job with a Malaysian company. And then there's the MM2H program, Malaysia My Second Home, but that's more for people with significant financial resources, usually looking towards retirement or longer-term residency.
So the key takeaway is,
Check official sources. Visa rules change. Get it sorted before you arrive. Seriously, the guide warns about fines, detention, even getting banned if you mess this up. Not worth the risk.
absolutely, get the paperwork right.
Yeah.
Okay, shifting gears. KL isn't just about work and visas. Culture, food. What's the scoop?
Oh, definitely. The guide really pushes exploring the local markets, calls them vibrant melting pots.
Any specific ones?
Peddling Street in Chinatown gets a shout out for the buzz, street food, bargain hunting, knockoffs too. And Central Market for arts, crafts, souvenirs. Haggling is expected, by the way.
Good to know. And the food. Malaysian food is legendary.
It really is. The guide highlights some absolute must-tries. Nasi lemak, the national dish, basically. Coconut rice, sambal, fried chicken, or anchovies. Delicious. Beef rendang, that rich, slow-cooked, spicy beef. And sendol for dessert, shaved ice. Coconut milk, palm sugar, those green jelly noodles. So refreshing.
Where do you find the best food?
The guide suggests getting out into the neighborhoods. Brickfields for Indian food, lots of vegetarian options. Jalen Alor for the famous nighttime seafood market vibe. And Taman Kanat Night Market is mentioned as having just tons of diverse street food.
Sounds amazing. I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. What about festivals or events?
Because it's so diverse, KL has a packed calendar. The guide mentions Saipasam, a huge Hindu festival, especially at Batu Caves, Hari Raya, which marks the end of Ramadan for Muslims, and Chinese New Year with lion dances, fireworks.
So lots happening throughout the year.
Yeah, and the guide encourages joining in or observing these, says it's a great way to experience the culture, and locals are usually very welcoming about sharing their traditions.
Sounds like a great way to immerse yourself.
Yeah.
Now, one last big topic. Community. Working remotely in a new city can be lonely. How do you connect with people in KL?
The guide acknowledges that potential isolation, yeah, but it also highlights that the digital nomad scene in KL is growing, so there are people to connect with.
How?
It suggests looking for networking events, industry ones, or just casual meetups you find online. Basically, just be open to chatting with people.
And using apps or websites?
Definitely. Meetup.com is recommended. You can find groups for anything language exchange if you want to practice Malay. Hiking groups, lots of nature around KL. Events run by co-working spaces for their members.
So shared interests are a good starting point.
Yeah, it helps you meet like-minded people and also gets you experiencing more of the local culture. And don't forget, online communities.
Like Facebook groups.
Exactly. Facebook groups, forums for expats, and digital nomads in KL. Great places to ask questions, get tips, find out about events. The guide suggests actually participating, not just lurking.
Good advice. Be active. Okay, so bringing this all together, wrapping up our deep dive. What's the final verdict on KL for digital nomads based on this guide and Move On Stay's insights?
The conclusion is pretty positive. KL comes across as a really compelling package. You've got that unique mix, affordability, good connectivity, fascinating culture that's easy to dive into, and this growing community.
So maybe not always the first place people think of.
Perhaps not as hyped as some other hubs, but the guide, backed by that long-term perspective from Move and Stay, suggests it offers some serious advantages and a really good quality of life. Definitely worth considering.
Right. So for you listening, as you think about Kuala Lumpur, what jumps out most? Is it the lower cost, the chance to experience that amazing culture and food, or maybe connecting with that growing nomad scene? perhaps spend some time digging a bit deeper into those neighborhoods we mentioned, or really look into the details of the Di Rantau visa if a longer stay appeals. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.